The heat shimmered off the desert floor like liquid silver, and through that wavering mirage, Austin Garrett saw what he first thought was a pile of discarded clothing until it moved with the weakest tremor of life. He had been riding for 3 days straight across the Oklahoma Territory in the summer of 1884, heading from Texas toward Ardmore with nothing but his horse, his rifle, and a saddlebag full of regrets. Austin had left behind a failed ranch, a brother who had stolen everything from him, and the burned remains of what he thought would be his future. At 27, he had learned that trust was a luxury and loneliness was simply the price of survival. But even with his heart hardened by betrayal and his soul weathered by disappointment, he could not ride past another human being left to die under the merciless Oklahoma sun. He dismounted quickly, his boots hitting the cracked earth with a soft thud. The figure was a woman, and she was in terrible condition. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, her skin burned red and peeling, her dress torn and filthy. She could not have been out here long, maybe a day or two at most, but in this heat that was more than enough to kill. Austin knelt beside her, pulling his canteen from his belt. "Madam," he said, his voice rough from his own thirst. "Madam, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered, revealing eyes so green they reminded him of spring grass, a startling contrast to the desolation surrounding them. She tried to speak, but only a dry rasp emerged from her throat. "Do not talk," Austin said firmly. He lifted her head gently, supporting it with one hand while he brought the canteen to her lips with the other. "Just small sips, not too much or you will make yourself sick." She drank desperately, and he had to pull the canteen away to keep her from gulping too fast. She whimpered in protest, her hand weakly reaching for more water. "I know," he said quietly. "I know you are thirsty, but you have to trust me. Too much too fast will hurt you worse." He let her have another small drink, then stoppered the canteen and looked around the desert. There was no wagon, no horse, no supplies of any kind. Whatever had happened to her, she had been left here with nothing. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked, looking back down at her. "Mara," she whispered, the word barely audible. "Mara Garrison." "Well, Miss Garrison, I am Austin Garrett, and I am going to get you somewhere safe, but we need to move now before this sun gets any worse. Do you think you can hold on to me if I get you on my horse?" She nodded weakly, and Austin wasted no time. He stood, scooped her into his arms with surprising gentleness for such a weathered cowboy, and carried her to his horse. The animal, a sturdy bay gelding named Chester, stood patiently as Austin carefully positioned Mara in the saddle. She slumped forward immediately, too weak to sit upright, so Austin mounted behind her and pulled her back against his chest, wrapping one arm securely around her waist while he held the reins with his other hand. "Just hold on," he murmured near her ear. "Ardmore is not too far. We will get you to a doctor." She did not respond, her head lolling against his shoulder as consciousness threatened to slip away from her again. Austin nudged Chester into a steady walk, knowing that speed was important but that the horse needed to conserve energy in this heat. As they rode, he gave Mara small amounts of water every few minutes, each time pulling the canteen away before she could drink too much. The miles passed slowly. Austin found himself studying the woman in his arms, wondering what terrible circumstance had led her to be abandoned in the desert. She was young, maybe 23 or 24, with dark brown hair that hung in tangled waves past her shoulders. Even burned and dehydrated, he could see that she was beautiful, with delicate features and a gracefulness to her frame despite her current state. But more than her appearance, there was something about the way she had looked at him with those green eyes, a mixture of fear and desperate hope that had struck something deep in his chest. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon when the buildings of Ardmore finally appeared in the distance. Austin felt Mara stir against him, consciousness returning in fits and starts. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice still hoarse but stronger than before. "Almost to Ardmore," Austin replied. "There is a doctor there. He will take care of you." "How did you find me?" The question came with a tremor, and Austin wondered if she was remembering whatever had led to her being in the desert. "I was just passing through. Saw you lying there and could not leave you. Thank you." The words were thick with emotion, and Austin felt her hand come up to grip his arm where it wrapped around her waist. "I thought I was going to die out there. You are safe now," he said, and he meant it. Whatever else happened, he would make sure this woman was taken care of. They rode into Ardmore as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. The town was small but bustling, with a main street lined with wooden buildings and a handful of people going about their evening business. Austin guided Chester directly to the doctor's office, a small building marked with a simple painted sign that read Dr. Samuel Morrison, Physician. Austin dismounted carefully, then reached up to help Mara down. Her legs buckled the moment her feet touched the ground, and he caught her easily, lifting her back into his arms. "I am sorry," she said, her voice embarrassed. "I cannot seem to stand." "You have nothing to apologize for," Austin said firmly. He carried her up the steps and kicked at the door with his boot. "Doc Morrison, I need help out here." The door swung open to reveal a middle-aged man with graying hair and spectacles perched on his nose. His eyes widened at the sight of Mara in Austin's arms. "Good Lord, bring her in quickly," Dr. Morrison said, stepping aside to let them enter. He gestured to an examination table in the center of the room. "Put her there." "What happened?" "Found her in the desert," Austin said as he gently laid Mara on the table. "She has been out there at least a day, maybe more. Dehydrated, sun-burned, weak." Dr. Morrison immediately began his examination, checking Mara's pulse, looking at her eyes, examining the burns on her skin. Austin stepped back to give him room, but he found he could not leave. He stood against the wall, hat in his hands, watching as the doctor worked. "You are very lucky this man found you," Dr. Morrison said to Mara as he prepared a tonic. "Another few hours and you would not have made it. As it is, you are severely dehydrated and have some serious sun damage, but I think you will recover with rest and proper care." "How long will she need to stay here?" Austin asked, surprising himself with the question. Why did he care? He had saved her, brought her to town, and now his obligation was fulfilled. He could leave, continue on to wherever he had been heading and forget about the woman with the green eyes. But he knew he would not. "At least a week, maybe more," Dr. Morrison said, mixing the tonic with water. "She needs to regain her strength, and those burns need time to heal. Miss Garrison, do you have family I can send word to? Anyone who should know you are safe?" Mara's expression darkened, a shadow crossing her face that spoke of pain deeper than her physical injuries. "No," she said quietly. "There is no one." Dr. Morrison nodded, not pressing the issue. "Well then, you are welcome to stay here until you are well enough to be on your feet. I have a small room in the back that I use for patients who need overnight care." "I cannot pay you," Mara said, her voice breaking. "I have nothing. No money, no belongings, nothing." "We will figure something out," Dr. Morrison said kindly. "Right now, you just need to rest and heal." Austin cleared his throat. "How much for her care, doctor?" Morrison named a price, and Austin reached into his pocket, pulling out most of the money he had left. It was nearly everything he owned, the small amount he had managed to save before his brother had stolen the ranch, but he handed it over without hesitation. "That should cover a week plus any medicine she needs," Austin said, Mara's eyes widened, tears spilling down her burned cheeks. "You do not have to do that. You have already saved my life. I cannot let you pay for this too." Austin met her gaze, and in that moment, something shifted inside him. He saw not just a woman he had rescued, but someone who understood what it meant to lose everything, to be alone in a world that could be cruel and unforgiving. He saw a reflection of his own pain, and somehow that made him want to protect her even more. "Yes, I do," he said simply. "You rest and get better. That is all you need to worry about." Before she could protest further, he turned and walked toward the door. But as his hand touched the knob, Dr. Morrison called out to him, "Mr. Garrett, where are you staying?" "In case I need to reach you regarding Miss Garrison's care." Austin paused. He had not thought that far ahead. He had planned to ride through Ardmore, maybe stop for a meal and a night's sleep before moving on. But now, standing at the threshold of leaving, he found he could not do it. Some inexplicable force was rooting him to this place, to this woman who had stumbled into his life by the cruelest twist of fate. "I will find a room at the boarding house," he said. "You can reach me there." He left before anyone could say anything else, stepping out into the cooling evening air. The main street of Ardmore was quieter now, with oil lamps beginning to flicker to life in windows. Austin stood on the doctor's porch for a long moment, staring at nothing, trying to understand what had just happened to him. He had told himself after his brother's betrayal that he would never open his heart to anyone again. It was easier that way, safer. But in the span of a few hours, a dying woman in the desert had somehow slipped past every defense he had built. He did not understand it, did not want to examine it too closely, but he could not deny the truth. He cared what happened to Mara Garrison. With a shake of his head, Austin led Chester down the street toward the boarding house. He would stay in Ardmore for a week, just to make sure Mara recovered properly. That was all. Then he would move on, continue his journey toward whatever uncertain future awaited him. This was not about feelings or connection or any foolish notion of fate. It was simply about doing the right thing. At least, that was what he told himself. The boarding house was run by a plump, cheerful woman named Mrs. Harriet Cole, who reminded Austin of his mother, dead now these past 5 years. She welcomed him warmly, showed him to a small but clean room on the second floor, and promised him breakfast at dawn. The room had a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the main street. It was more than adequate for his needs. After settling Chester in the livery stable down the street, Austin returned to his room and collapsed on the bed, exhaustion finally catching up with him. But despite his weariness, sleep did not come easily. His mind kept returning to Mara, wondering about her story, worrying about her recovery. He found himself listening to every sound from the street, half expecting to hear someone come running with news that her condition had worsened. When he finally did sleep, his dreams were filled with images of the desert, of green eyes filled with fear and hope, of a woman's voice whispering his name. The next morning, Austin woke early and made his way to Dr. Morrison's office after breakfast. He told himself he was just checking on his investment, making sure his money was being put to good use, but the truth was he needed to see that Mara was truly all right. Dr. Morrison answered his knock with a knowing smile. "I wondered when you would show up. She is doing much better this morning." The tonic helped, and she managed to eat some broth earlier. "Come in. I am sure she would like to thank you properly." Austin followed the doctor through the main room and into the small back area that served as a recovery room. Mara was sitting up in a narrow bed, looking far better than she had the previous evening. Color had returned to her face, though the burns were still visible on her skin. Someone, likely Dr. Morrison or his wife, had cleaned her up and dressed her in a simple white nightgown. Her dark hair had been brushed and hung loose around her shoulders. When she saw Austin, her face lit up with a smile that made his breath catch. "Mr. Garrett," she said, her voice still rough but much stronger. "I was hoping you would come by. I wanted to thank you again for what you did. Dr. Morrison told me you paid for my care. I do not know how I will ever repay you." Austin removed his hat and twisted it in his hands, suddenly feeling awkward. "You do not owe me anything. I am just glad you are feeling better." "Please sit," Mara said, gesturing to a chair beside the bed. "If you have time, I would like to talk to you if you do not mind." Austin sat, draping his hat over his knee. Dr. Morrison quietly excused himself, leaving them alone. The room felt suddenly smaller, more intimate, and Austin found himself acutely aware of Mara's presence, of the way the morning light streaming through the window caught in her hair, of the depth of emotion in those green eyes. "I suppose you are wondering what I was doing in the desert," Mara said after a moment of silence. "Only if you want to tell me," Austin replied. "Your business is your own." Mara looked down at her hands, which were folded in her lap. "I want to tell you, you saved my life." "You deserve to know the truth." She took a deep breath. "I was married. My husband Thomas, he was a gambler and a drunk. We lived in Fort Worth, Texas, and for 3 years I endured his temper, his cruelty, his debts. 2 weeks ago he lost everything we had in a poker game. Everything. Our home, our money, even my mother's jewelry that she left me when she died." Austin felt anger kindle in his chest at the thought of any man treating a woman so poorly, but he remained quiet, letting her continue. "I told him I was leaving," Mara went on, her voice trembling slightly. "I said I could not live like that anymore. He got so angry. He hit me, worse than he ever had before, and when I managed to get away, he came after me. I ran, got on one of our horses, and just rode. I rode for 2 days, barely stopping, not really knowing where I was going. I just wanted to get as far from him as possible." "That is when you ended up in the desert," Austin said. Mara nodded. "The horse threw me. I think it was a snake that spooked her. I do not really remember. When I woke up, the horse was gone and I was alone. I tried to walk, thought maybe I could find help, but I did not know which direction to go. After a few hours, I could not walk anymore. I just collapsed, and that is where you found me." "Your husband," Austin said carefully. "Do you think he is still looking for you?" Fear flashed across Mara's face. "I do not know. Maybe. Thomas never liked to let go of things he considered his, and he always said I was his property." She shuddered. "That is why I told Dr. Morrison I have no one. I do not want anyone to know where I am. If Thomas finds me—" "He will not hurt you again," Austin said with a firmness that surprised even himself. "I will make sure of that." Mara looked at him with such gratitude and relief that Austin felt something in his chest tighten. "Why are you being so kind to me? You do not even know me." Austin was quiet for a moment, considering the question. Why was he doing this? Why did he care so much about a stranger? "I know what it is like to be betrayed by someone you trusted," he finally said. "My brother stole everything from me. The ranch we built together, the cattle, the land. He forged my signature on documents, sold it all, and disappeared with the money, left me with nothing." "I am so sorry," Mara said softly. "So I understand what you are feeling," Austin continued. "That sense of having lost everything, of being alone. Nobody should have to go through that without someone to help them." Their eyes met, and in that moment, something passed between them. An understanding, a connection that went deeper than words. Austin realized with a start that for the first time since his brother's betrayal, the heavy weight of loneliness that had been crushing his chest felt a little lighter. "What will you do now?" Austin asked. "After you recover." Mara bit her lip, uncertainty clouding her features. I have no idea. I have no money, no skills beyond keeping a house. I suppose I could try to find work as a cook or a maid, but I do not know if anyone would hire me, and I am terrified that Thomas might find me." An idea was forming in Austin's mind, wild and impulsive and probably foolish, but he could not shake it. "What if you stayed here, in Ardmore?" "Stayed here?" Mara looked confused. "But I have nothing. How would I live?" "I am going to be honest with you," Austin said, leaning forward in his chair. "I came to Ardmore because I heard there was land available cheap. I was thinking about starting over, building a new ranch. It would not be much at first, just a small operation, but it would be something. And a ranch needs more than just a cowboy. It needs someone to manage the house, to cook, to handle all the things that I do not have time for when I am working the land." Mara's eyes widened. "Are you offering me a job?" "I am offering you a chance at a new start," Austin said. "A safe place where your husband would not think to look for you. Fair wages and honest work. What do you say?" For a moment, Mara just stared at him, and Austin worried he had overstepped, that he had frightened her with his forwardness. But then tears began to roll down her cheeks, and she reached out to take his hand. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I would like that very much." Austin felt a smile spread across his face, the first genuine smile he had worn in months. "Then it is settled. You take your time recovering, and when Dr. Morrison says you are well enough, we will start looking at land. Together." The word "together" hung in the air between them, carrying more weight than Austin had intended, but he did not take it back. Because somehow, impossibly, in the span of less than a day, his solitary journey had become something more. He was no longer alone, and neither was she. Over the next week, Austin visited Mara every day. He would stop by in the morning after breakfast, sit with her for an hour or two, talking about everything and nothing. She told him about her childhood in Missouri, about her parents who had died of cholera when she was 19, about how she had met Thomas at a church social and thought he was charming until after they married, and his true nature revealed itself. Austin shared his own stories, about growing up on a small farm in Tennessee, about coming west with his brother Marcus when they were barely 20 years old, full of dreams and ambitions. He told her about the back-breaking work of building the ranch, the long nights and early mornings, the satisfaction of watching something grow from nothing. And he told her about the day he discovered what Marcus had done, about the cold shock of betrayal, about the hollow feeling that had settled in his gut and never quite gone away. As the days passed, Austin found himself looking forward to these visits more than anything else. Mara was easy to talk to, with a quick wit and a gentle humor that surfaced now that she was no longer fighting for survival. She was intelligent and thoughtful, asking questions about ranching that showed genuine interest. And she was beautiful, though Austin tried not to dwell on that fact too much. This was a business arrangement, he told himself. He was offering her a job, not courting her. But he could not deny the way his heart beat faster when he walked into the doctor's office each morning, or the way his eyes searched for her face first thing. He could not deny the warmth that spread through his chest when she smiled at him, or the protectiveness he felt whenever she mentioned her husband. By the end of the week, Dr. Morrison pronounced Mara well enough to leave his care. Her burns were healing, though she would have some scarring, and her strength had returned. Austin had spent the week not just visiting Mara, but also researching available land around Ardmore. He had found a promising parcel about 5 miles outside of town, 160 acres with a small creek running through it. It was not much, but it was a start. On the day Mara was released from the doctor's care, Austin took her to see the land. Mrs. Cole from the boarding house had kindly donated one of her old dresses for Mara to wear, a simple blue calico that fit reasonably well. Mara had protested the charity, but Mrs. Cole had insisted, saying she had too many dresses anyway, and it was about time someone got use out of them. They rode out together on Chester, Mara sitting in front of Austin just as she had the day he found her. But this time she was not weak and dying. This time she was vibrant and alive, pointing out birds and wildflowers, commenting on the beauty of the landscape. Austin found himself watching her more than the scenery, marveling at the transformation. When they reached the property, Austin helped Mara down from the horse and walked her around, pointing out the boundaries, showing her where he thought the house should go, where he could build a barn and corrals. "It is perfect," Mara said, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. The land rolled gently, covered in prairie grass that swayed in the breeze. The creek sparkled in the sunlight, lined with cottonwood trees that provided welcome shade. In the distance, the low hills of Oklahoma Territory stretched toward the horizon. "I can see it all so clearly." The house there with a porch where you could sit in the evenings, a garden over there near the creek where the soil would be good, maybe some chickens and definitely a milk cow. Austin smiled at her enthusiasm. "So you think I should buy it?" "Absolutely," Mara said firmly. She turned to look at him, her face glowing with excitement. "This is going to be a wonderful ranch, Austin. I just know it." It was the first time she had used his given name instead of calling him Mr. Garrett, and the sound of it on her lips made something flip in Austin's stomach. He cleared his throat, trying to ignore the feeling. "Well then, I guess I had better go make an offer. The land office is open tomorrow. If all goes well, we could be breaking ground on a house by the end of the week." "We," Mara repeated softly, testing the word. She looked at Austin with an expression he could not quite read. "That sounds nice." They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other, and Austin felt the air between them charge with something electric. He wanted to reach out and touch her to see if she was real, to tell her that she made him feel things he thought he would never feel again. But he held back. It was too soon, too complicated. She was running from an abusive husband. She needed safety and security, not a lonely cowboy with confused feelings. So instead he just nodded and said, "We should head back to town before it gets dark." The ride back was quieter than the ride out, but it was a comfortable silence. Mara leaned back against Austin's chest, and he allowed himself to wrap his arm a little more securely around her waist. Tomorrow, he would start the process of buying the land. Tomorrow, he would begin building his new life. But today, right now, he simply let himself enjoy the feeling of not being alone. The next day, Austin went to the land office and made an offer on the property. The land agent, a shrewd man named Mr. Pemberton, drove a hard bargain, but Austin had been expecting that. He used almost every penny he had left, including some money he made by selling his saddle and buying a cheaper one, but by the end of the day, the land was his. He walked out of the office with a deed in his hand and a mixture of excitement and terror in his heart. He had committed himself now. There was no going back. Mara was waiting for him at the boarding house, sitting in the small parlor with Mrs. Cole. When she saw the paper in his hand, she jumped up with a squeal of delight that made Mrs. Cole laugh. "You did it. You bought the land." "We bought the land," Austin corrected, handing her the deed so she could see it. "This is our new start, Mara, yours and mine." Mrs. Cole looked between them with a knowing smile. "I think this calls for a celebration. I will make us a special dinner tonight. We will have a proper toast to your new ranch." That evening, Mrs. Cole outdid herself with a meal of fried chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and fresh baked bread. She even brought out a bottle of wine that her late husband had been saving for a special occasion. Austin, Mara, Mrs. Cole, and the two other boarders sat around the dining table, laughing and talking as Mrs. Cole shared stories about Ardmore's history. Austin watched Mara across the table, seeing how she had blossomed in just over a week. The frightened, broken woman he had found in the desert was gone, replaced by someone confident and hopeful. Her green eyes sparkled in the lamplight, and her laughter rang out like music. She was, Austin realized with a jolt, the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. After dinner, Austin walked Mara out to the porch. The night was warm, with stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on velvet. They sat on the porch swing, rocking gently back and forth. "Thank you," Mara said quietly, "for everything. For saving my life, for giving me a chance at a new beginning, for treating me like I matter." "You do matter," Austin said, his voice rough with emotion. "More than you know." Mara turned to look at him, and Austin saw something in her eyes that made his breath catch. "Austin, I need to tell you something. I know we have only known each other for a week. I know that by all rights I should still be grieving the end of my marriage, even though it was a terrible marriage. But I cannot stop thinking about you. When you are with me, I feel safe and happy in a way I have never felt before. And when you are not there, I miss you. I think I am falling for you, and I do not know if that is appropriate or if I am being foolish, but I needed to be honest." Austin's heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. "You are not being foolish. I feel the same way. I have been trying to tell myself it is too soon, that I should not have these feelings, but I cannot help it. From the moment I saw you in that desert, something just clicked into place, like I had been searching for something my whole life and finally found it." "Really?" Mara's voice was barely a whisper. "Really," Austin confirmed. He reached out and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "I do not know how this happened so fast. Maybe it is because we both know what it is like to lose everything. Maybe it is because we saved each other in different ways. Or maybe it is just fate. But I do know that I want you in my life, Mara, not just as my housekeeper, but as my partner. As the woman I come home to every night." Tears slipped down Mara's cheeks, but she was smiling. "I want that too, more than anything." Austin lifted his free hand and gently wiped away her tears with his thumb. "There is one problem, though. You are still married." Mara's expression grew serious. "I know, but I can get a divorce. Oklahoma Territory has laws that allow it in cases of abandonment and cruelty. Dr. Morrison told me about a lawyer in town who could help me. It will take time, maybe 6 months or more, but I can do it." "Then that is what we will do," Austin said. "We will build the ranch. You will get your divorce, and when you are free, if you still want me, I will marry you proper. We will do this right." "I will still want you," Mara said with absolute certainty. 6 months, 6 years, it does not matter. I know what I feel, and I know it is real." Austin could not help himself. He leaned forward and pressed a soft kiss to her forehead, letting his lips linger there for a moment. "Then we have a plan." They sat on that porch swing for hours, talking about their future, making plans for the ranch, dreaming about what their life together would look like. By the time they finally said goodnight, Austin felt like a different man than the one who had ridden into Ardmore a week ago. He had purpose again. He had hope. And most importantly, he had found something he never expected to find: love. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. Austin began construction on the house, doing most of the work himself with occasional help from some men he hired in town. Mara worked alongside him whenever she could, though he often had to physically stop her from taking on tasks that were too strenuous. She was determined to prove her worth, to show that she was not just a burden but a true partner. "You do not have to prove anything to me," Austin told her one afternoon as he caught her trying to carry lumber that was far too heavy for her. "I already know how strong you are." "I just want to help," Mara said, frustration evident in her voice. "You are working so hard and I feel useless." Austin set down the lumber and took her by the shoulders. "You are not useless. You have been drawing up plans for the garden, making lists of supplies we will need, keeping track of our expenses so we do not overspend. That is all important work. And besides, I like having you here, even if you are just sitting in the shade watching me work. It makes me happy." Mara softened at his words. "It makes me happy too. I have never felt so content as I do when I am with you." They had been careful over the past months not to do anything that would be considered improper. Mara was still technically married, and despite their feelings for each other, they wanted to respect the process of her divorce. But moments like these, when they were alone on their land with no one around to see, Austin allowed himself small intimacies. He would hold her hand, or put his arm around her shoulders, or kiss her temple. Nothing that crossed the line, but enough to remind them both that they were building something together. Mara had indeed found a lawyer in Ardmore, a stern but fair man named Mr. Whitfield who specialized in divorce cases. He had taken her case without hesitation after hearing about Thomas's abuse and abandonment. The wheels of justice turned slowly, with paperwork to be filed and notices to be posted, but Mr. Whitfield assured them that the divorce would be granted. It was just a matter of time. By the end of September, the house was finished. It was small, just 3 rooms with a kitchen, but it was solid and well built, with large windows that let in plenty of light and a wide front porch, just like Mara had envisioned. Austin had even built her a rocking chair to put on the porch, spending his evenings carefully sanding and polishing the wood until it was smooth as silk. The day they moved in was one of the happiest of Austin's life. Mrs. Cole had helped Mara gather some basic furniture and household items, donations from various people in town who had heard their story and wanted to help. It was not much, but it was enough to make the house feel like a home. That evening they sat on the porch together, watching the sun set over their land. Austin had his arm around Mara's shoulders, and she was leaning against him, her head resting in the crook of his neck. "I love it here," Mara said softly. "I never thought I could feel this happy again." "Neither did I," Austin admitted. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You have changed my life, Mara. Before I found you, I was just drifting, not really caring about anything. But now, I have a reason to get up in the morning. I have something to work toward." "You gave me the same thing," Mara said. She tilted her head up to look at him. "You gave me hope when I thought all hope was lost. You showed me what it means to be treated with kindness and respect. You made me believe in love again." Their faces were inches apart, and Austin could feel the warmth of her breath on his lips. He wanted so badly to kiss her, to show her with actions what he felt in his heart. But he held back. Just a little longer, he told himself. Wait until she was free. As if reading his mind, Mara said, "Mr. Whitfield told me yesterday that he expects the divorce to be finalized within the next month. Thomas never responded to any of the notices, which works in our favor. The judge is prepared to grant the divorce on grounds of abandonment and cruelty." Austin felt his heart skip a beat. "1 more month," he said, and he could not keep the anticipation out of his voice. "1 more month," Mara agreed, her eyes shining with promise. October brought cooler weather and the changing of the leaves. Austin worked on building a barn and corral, preparing for the cattle he planned to buy in the spring. Mara finished planting her garden, putting in vegetables that would survive the winter and bloom in the spring. They fell into an easy routine, working during the day and spending their evenings together on the porch, talking and planning and simply enjoying each other's company. True to Mr. Whitfield's prediction, Mara's divorce was finalized in late October. She came back from town one afternoon with the papers in her hand, tears streaming down her face. "I am free," she said as Austin met her at the door. "I am finally free." Austin swept her up in his arms, spinning her around as she laughed through her tears. When he set her down, he cupped her face in his hands and looked into her green eyes. "Mara Garrison, I have been waiting to ask you this for months. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my companion for the rest of our lives?" "Yes," Mara said without hesitation. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." And then, finally, Austin kissed her. It was everything he had imagined and more, sweet and tender and filled with all the emotion he had been holding back. Mara kissed him back with equal fervor, her arms wrapping around his neck, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Austin rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Mara. I think I have loved you since the moment I saw you in that desert, even though I did not understand it at the time." "I love you too," Mara whispered, "with all my heart." They were married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony at the church in Ardmore. Dr. Morrison stood as Austin's witness, and Mrs. Cole stood for Mara. The ceremony was simple but beautiful, with Mara wearing a dress that Mrs. Cole had made for her, white with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Austin wore his best suit, which was not much, but he had taken care to brush it clean and press it properly. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Austin kissed Mara with all the love and promise he felt in his heart. The small congregation cheered, and someone started playing the piano. It was not a grand wedding, but it was perfect for them. After the ceremony, Mrs. Cole hosted a small reception at the boarding house. There was cake and punch, music and dancing. Austin danced with his new wife, holding her close, marveling at the fact that she was his now, truly and completely his. "Thank you for finding me," Mara whispered as they swayed together. "Thank you for saving me." "You saved me too," Austin replied. "We saved each other." That night, they returned to their home as husband and wife. Austin carried Mara over the threshold, both of them laughing as he almost tripped on the door frame. They stood in the kitchen, suddenly shy despite all the months they had spent together. "I cannot believe you are really my wife," Austin said, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind Mara's ear. "I cannot believe I am really your wife," Mara echoed. She took his hand and placed it over her heart. "But I am so happy that I am." They made love that night for the first time, gentle and tender, taking their time to explore and discover each other. Afterward, they lay tangled together in their bed, the moonlight streaming through the window casting silver shadows across the floor. "I want to build a big life with you," Austin said, running his fingers through Mara's hair. "I want to grow this ranch, raise a family, grow old together on this land." "That sounds perfect," Mara said, snuggling closer to him. "I want all of that too. A life full of love and laughter, children running around, a home filled with warmth." "How many children?" Austin asked with a smile in his voice. Mara thought for a moment. "At least 3, maybe 4. What about you?" "As many as you want to give me," Austin said. "I want our house to be full of life and noise and joy. I want to erase all the loneliness and pain we both felt before we found each other." "We will," Mara promised. "We will build such a beautiful life together, Austin. I know we will." And they did. The winter months passed peacefully, with Austin and Mara settling into married life. They spent long evenings by the fire, reading together or working on projects for the ranch. Austin taught Mara how to shoot a rifle, insisting that she needed to know how to protect herself when he was out on the range. Mara proved to be a quick learner, and Austin felt better knowing she could take care of herself. In the spring, Austin bought his first cattle, just 10 head to start with. It was not much, but it was a beginning. He worked dawn to dusk building up the ranch, repairing fences, tending to the animals, planning for expansion. Mara kept the house, tended her garden which was flourishing beautifully, and often brought lunch out to Austin in the fields. Those moments, sitting in the shade eating sandwiches and talking about their day, became some of Austin's favorites. By summer, Mara discovered she was pregnant. She told Austin one evening as they sat on the porch, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby," she said, her eyes shining with tears of joy. Austin felt his throat tighten with emotion. "A baby," he repeated, awed. He pulled Mara into his arms, holding her tightly. "We are going to be parents. Are you happy?" Mara asked, though she could surely see the answer on his face. "I am more than happy," Austin said. "I am overwhelmed. I never thought I would have this, a wife and a family and a home. I thought I was destined to be alone. But you gave me all of this, Mara. You gave me everything." The pregnancy was not easy for Mara. She suffered from terrible morning sickness in the early months, and Austin spent many mornings holding her hair back and bringing her water and dry crackers. But he never complained. He was attentive and caring, doing everything he could to make her comfortable. As her belly grew, Austin became even more protective. He would not let her do any heavy work, insisting that she rest and take care of herself. Mara protested at first, wanting to pull her weight, but eventually she gave in to his concerns. She spent her days sewing baby clothes, preparing the small bedroom they had set aside as a nursery, and reading books about motherhood that Mrs. Cole lent her. Their son was born in early March of 1886, on a cold but clear morning. The midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Fletcher, arrived just in time to help deliver the baby. Austin paced outside the bedroom, his heart in his throat every time he heard Mara cry out in pain. But finally, after what felt like an eternity, he heard a new sound, the strong, healthy cry of a newborn baby. Mrs. Fletcher opened the door with a smile. "You have a son, Mr. Garrett, a fine, healthy boy, and your wife is doing well. You can come in now." Austin rushed into the room to find Mara propped up in bed, exhausted but glowing, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "Look at him, Austin. Look at our son." Austin knelt beside the bed, looking down at the impossibly small face peeking out from the blanket. The baby had Mara's dark hair and what looked like it might be Austin's nose. His eyes were closed, and he was making little snuffling sounds. Austin felt his eyes burn with tears. "He is perfect," Austin whispered. He reached out with one finger and gently touched his son's tiny hand. The baby's fingers immediately curled around Austin's finger, gripping tightly, and Austin felt his heart overflow. "He is absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" Mara asked. They had discussed names for months but had never quite settled on one. Now, looking at his son, Austin knew exactly what felt right. "What about Andrew?" he suggested. "Andrew Marcus Garrett." "Marcus?" Mara looked at him in surprise. "After your brother," Austin nodded slowly. "I know what he did to me was terrible and I may never forgive him. But he was still my brother, and there were good times before everything went wrong. This baby represents a new beginning, a fresh start. Maybe naming him after Marcus is a way of reclaiming those good memories, of not letting the bad ones define everything." Mara smiled through her tears. "Andrew Marcus Garrett. I love it. It is perfect." The first few weeks with baby Andrew were challenging. He cried often, especially at night, and both Austin and Mara were exhausted from lack of sleep. But even in the midst of the difficulty, there were moments of pure joy. The first time Andrew smiled at Austin, the cowboy felt his heart might burst. The first time Andrew fell asleep on his chest, tiny hand fisted in Austin's shirt, Austin felt a peace he had never known. "This is what I was missing my whole life," Austin told Mara one night as they both stood over Andrew's cradle, watching him sleep. "I thought it was the ranch or the land or proving myself, but it was this, it was family, it was love." Mara slipped her hand into his. "I was missing it too, and now we have it, we have everything." As Andrew grew from an infant to a toddler, the ranch grew too. Austin bought more cattle, built a bigger barn, hired a ranch hand to help with the work. The operation was still small compared to the big ranches, but it was profitable and growing steadily. Mara's garden expanded, and she started selling vegetables and preserves in town, adding to their income. When Andrew was 2 years old, Mara became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and in the spring of 1888 they welcomed a daughter into the world. They named her Amelia Rose Garrett, and she was the image of her mother with green eyes and delicate features. Austin adored his daughter. He would spend hours just holding her, singing her soft songs, telling her stories about her brave mother who had survived the desert. Andrew, now a rambunctious toddler, was initially jealous of the new baby, but he quickly became protective of his little sister, always wanting to help take care of her. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Austin worked the ranch. Mara managed the household, and together they raised their children with love and laughter. The house that had once seemed too big for just the two of them now felt full and alive with the sounds of children playing, meals shared around the table, bedtime stories, and goodnight kisses. On their third wedding anniversary, Austin and Mara sat on the porch after putting the children to bed. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, and the prairie stretched out before them, peaceful and beautiful. "You remember what you told me the first day I brought you here?" Austin asked, his arm around Mara's shoulders. "I said a lot of things that day," Mara replied with a smile. "You said this was going to be a wonderful ranch," Austin reminded her. "And you were right. It is wonderful, not because of the cattle or the land or the house, but because you are here, because we built this together." "We did build it together," Mara agreed. She looked up at him, her green eyes soft with love. "Sometimes I think about that day in the desert when I thought I was going to die. I think about how scared I was, how certain I was that my life was over. And then you appeared, like an answer to a prayer I did not even know I had prayed. You saved my life in so many ways, Austin." "You saved mine too," Austin said, pulling her closer. "I was so lost before I found you. I did not even realize how lost I was. But you gave me direction, purpose, a reason to keep going. You taught me how to hope again." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, rocking gently in the swing Austin had built when they first moved in. The stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky, bright pinpoints of light against the velvet darkness. "I want to have more children," Mara said suddenly. "At least one more, maybe two." Austin smiled. "I want that too. I love our family and I would love to make it even bigger." "We are going to need a bigger house," Mara said practically. "Andrew and Amelia are already running out of space in that little bedroom." "Then we will build a bigger house," Austin said easily. "We will add on, make more bedrooms, maybe even a proper parlor." "Whatever you want, whatever our family needs." "I do not need anything fancy," Mara said. "I just need you and our children. As long as I have that, I have everything." "You will always have that," Austin promised. "I will spend every day of the rest of my life making sure you know how loved you are, how precious you are to me. You and our children are my whole world, Mara." Mara turned in his arms and kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. "And you are mine." The years continued to pass, marked by the changing of seasons and the growth of their family. When Amelia was 3, Mara gave birth to another son, whom they named Alexander James Garrett. And 2 years after that, their fourth and final child arrived, another daughter they named Anna Mee Garrett. The ranch continued to prosper. What had started as a small operation with 10 head of cattle had grown into a successful ranch with over 100 head, multiple horses, and a reputation for quality. Austin hired more ranch hands as the work increased, good men who respected him and were loyal to the family. Mara's role expanded beyond managing the household. She became known in Ardmore for her excellent cooking and her generous spirit. She often invited ranch hands to meals, making sure that the men who worked for them felt appreciated and cared for. She also started teaching reading and writing to some of the children of ranch hands, turning their home into an informal schoolhouse 2 afternoons a week. Andrew grew into a fine young man who loved the ranch life, following his father around from the time he could walk, learning everything there was to know about cattle and horses and working the land. Amelia was quieter and more bookish, preferring to spend her time reading or helping her mother in the garden. Alexander was the wild child, always getting into mischief and making everyone laugh with his antics. And Anna was the peacemaker, sweet and gentle, able to calm any situation with her soft voice and kind heart. Austin watched his children grow with a mixture of pride and amazement. Sometimes in quiet moments, he would think back to that day in the desert when he had been riding alone, bitter and lost, with no hope for the future. And then he would look around at his wife, his children, his thriving ranch, and he could hardly believe how much his life had changed. One evening when Andrew was 15, Amelia was 13, Alexander was 10, and Anna was 8. The family gathered around the dinner table as they did every evening. It was a tradition that Austin and Mara had maintained from the beginning. No matter how busy the day was, the family always ate dinner together. "Papa," Andrew said as Mara served the roast beef, "I have been thinking about the future. I want to run this ranch someday. I want to make it even bigger and better than it already is." Austin felt a swell of pride at his son's words. "Is that so? Well, this ranch will be yours someday, son. Yours and your brothers and sisters. It is a family legacy." "Tell us again how you and Mama met," Anna said, her eyes bright with interest. It was a story the children never tired of hearing. Austin glanced at Mara, who smiled and nodded. So Austin launched into the familiar tale, telling them about how he had been riding through the desert, about how he had almost missed seeing their mother lying there, about how he had known immediately that he had to save her. And then what happened? Alexander asked eagerly, even though he had heard this story dozens of times. "Then I brought her to Dr. Morrison in Ardmore," Austin continued. "And while she was recovering, I realized that she was the most extraordinary woman I had ever met. She was brave and strong and kind, even after everything she had been through, and I knew that I wanted her in my life forever." "It was not quite that simple," Mara interjected with a laugh. "Your father had to convince me that I was worth saving, that I deserved a second chance. I was so broken back then, so convinced that I was worthless." "You were never worthless," Austin said firmly, reaching across the table to take her hand. "You were always precious. I just had to help you see it." "And Mama helped Papa too," Amelia added. "She helped him learn to trust again after Uncle Marcus hurt him." Austin nodded. "That is true. We healed each other. That is what love does. It heals the broken places and makes you whole again." After dinner, after the children had been sent to bed, Austin and Mara took their usual evening walk around the property. It was something they had started when Andrew was a baby and had continued ever since, a way to have time alone together, to talk about the day and their plans for tomorrow. "I have been thinking," Mara said as they walked hand in hand toward the creek. "We have been married for almost 13 years now. 13 wonderful, incredible years." "The best years of my life," Austin said sincerely. "Mine too," Mara agreed. "And I want you to know that I fall more in love with you every single day. When I see you with our children, teaching Andrew about the cattle, reading stories to Anna, laughing with Alexander, listening to Amelia talk about her books, my heart just overflows. You are such a good father, such a good husband. I could not have dreamed up a better partner if I tried." Austin stopped walking and turned to face her, cupping her face in his hands. The moonlight caught in her hair, and Austin thought she had never looked more beautiful. "You are the love I never expected," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I thought I would spend my life alone, bitter and angry, but you came into my life like a miracle and you transformed everything. You gave me hope and love and a family. You gave me a reason to live, Mara. And I will spend every remaining day I have on this earth thanking God that I was riding through that desert on that particular day, that I looked in that particular direction, that I found you." Tears slipped down Mara's cheeks. "I thank God for that too, every single day." They stood there under the stars, holding each other, feeling the weight of their love and their history and their shared life. They had built something beautiful together, something lasting. From the ashes of their individual tragedies, they had created a life filled with joy and meaning. "Do you think we will always be this happy?" Mara asked quietly. "I think we will have challenges," Austin said honestly. "Life is not always easy, but I think as long as we face those challenges together, as long as we keep choosing each other every day, we will get through anything. And yes, I think we will always be happy, because we have each other and we have our children and we have this life we built together. That is more than enough." "It is everything," Mara whispered. They walked back to the house hand in hand, their hearts full, their future bright. The house was quiet now, the children all asleep, but it was a peaceful quiet, the kind that comes from a home filled with love. As they prepared for bed, Austin thought about the journey that had brought him here. The betrayal of his brother, the long, lonely ride through Oklahoma territory, the moment he had seen a dying woman in the desert and made the choice to stop. Every step, even the painful ones, had led him to this moment, to this life, to this love. And as he climbed into bed beside his wife, pulling her close and feeling her nestle against his chest, Austin Garrett knew with absolute certainty that he was the luckiest man alive. He had been a lonely cowboy riding through the desert, and he had rescued a starving woman who had nothing. And in doing so, he had found everything he had ever needed. The years continued to flow like the creek on their property, steady and sure. Andrew eventually married a young woman from town, a banker's daughter named Sarah, and they settled on a piece of land adjacent to the main ranch. He took over more and more of the daily operations, allowing Austin to slow down a bit as he aged. Amelia surprised everyone by announcing that she wanted to become a teacher, and after completing her education, she opened a proper school in Ardmore. Alexander, true to his wild nature, became a horse breeder, developing a reputation for training some of the finest horses in Oklahoma territory. And Anna, sweet Anna, married a doctor and moved to Tulsa, though she visited often with her own growing family. Austin and Mara became grandparents, a role they embraced with joy. They loved having their grandchildren visit the ranch, teaching them to ride horses, telling them stories, spoiling them in the way that grandparents do. The house that Austin had built all those years ago had been expanded several times and was now a sprawling ranch house with multiple bedrooms, a large kitchen, and a wrap-around porch. But even with all the changes, some things remained constant. Every evening, unless the weather was truly terrible, Austin and Mara sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset and talking about their day. It was their ritual, their sacred time together, and they guarded it fiercely. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a celebration at the ranch. It seemed like the entire town of Ardmore turned out, along with ranch hands past and present, neighbors from miles around, and all their grandchildren. There was food and music and dancing, and speeches about what a wonderful couple Austin and Mara were, how they represented everything good about love and commitment and building a life together. But the best moment came at the end of the evening after all the guests had left and the children had taken the grandchildren home. Austin and Mara sat on their porch swing, both exhausted but happy, holding hands in the darkness. 30 years, Mara said wonderingly. It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. I would do it all again, Austin said. Every single moment, good and bad. It all led to this, to us, to the life we built. Me too, Mara agreed. She leaned her head on his shoulder, fitting perfectly in the space that seemed made just for her. You know what I think about sometimes? I think about that moment in the desert when I was dying. I had given up. I was ready for it to end. And then I heard your voice, and I felt water on my lips, and I thought maybe I was already dead and you were an angel. Austin chuckled. Nobody has ever accused me of being an angel before. But you were mine, Mara said seriously. You saved me in every way a person can be saved. You gave me life and love and purpose. You gave me a reason to keep breathing, to keep hoping, to keep believing that good things were possible. You did the same for me, Austin said, his voice thick. I was barely alive when I found you. I was just going through the motions, not really living. You woke me up, Mara. You made me feel again. You taught me what it means to truly love someone, to build a life with them, to grow old with them. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the prairie, crickets chirping, a distant owl hooting, the gentle rustle of wind through the grass. This land had been their canvas, and together they had painted a masterpiece. I love you, Austin Garrett, Mara said softly. I have loved you from the moment you appeared in that desert, even though I did not understand it at the time, and I will love you until my last breath. I love you too, Mara Garrett, Austin replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. The absolute best thing. They remained on the porch long into the night, wrapped in each other's arms, surrounded by the life they had built together. The lonely cowboy and the starving woman he had rescued had become so much more than the sum of their past tragedies. They had become partners, lovers, best friends, parents, grandparents. They had become each other's home. And as the stars wheeled overhead and the night deepened around them, Austin thought about fate and timing and the strange ways that life could surprise you. He thought about how close he had come to riding right past Mara that day in the desert, how he almost had not seen her, how different his life would have been if he had just kept going. But he had stopped. He had looked. He had cared. And in that single act of compassion, he had found everything he had been searching for without even knowing he was searching for it. As they finally stood to head inside, Mara paused and looked back at the prairie, silvered by moonlight, stretching out endlessly before them. This land witnessed our whole story, she said quietly. It saw me dying in the desert. It saw you save me. It saw us fall in love, get married, raise our children. It has been silent witness to every moment of our life together. And it will be here long after we are gone, Austin added. Our children's children will walk this same land, sit on this same porch, and hopefully they will remember the love story that started it all. They will remember, Mara said with certainty, because it is a love story worth remembering. The lonely cowboy who rescued a starving woman from the desert and found the love he never expected. "The love I never expected," Austin repeated, smiling, "but the love I always needed." They went inside together, closing the door on another beautiful day, looking forward to all the days yet to come. And the prairie, ancient and eternal, kept their secrets and their story, holding it safe in the wind and the soil and the endless Oklahoma sky.